Hey, what's up? It's Jim and Baby Soph, and we're here to talk about Boss Baby, or The Boss Baby, I think. Boss Baby kind of, let's get your hands out of there. Okay. Boss Baby shows kind of both the strengths and weaknesses to the DreamWorks studio, and also is a fairly inaccurate portrayal of babies, as Baby Soph was not really a fan, were you, Sophie? As she screamed during a large part of it. What? Oh, she just wants... What's wrong with Boss? Yeah? Oh no, what else? What'd you think of Alec Baldwin? That was it? That was it? Okay. That was a good review. You're a good critic already. Oh no? Oh, Boss Baby upset you a lot. Yeah? What'd you... How angry are you about Boss Baby? Yeah. So, Boss Baby shows both the strength and weaknesses of the DreamWorks animation studio. It has really cartoony, beautiful visuals, and has... You disagree? You don't think so? But the script was typical DreamWorks in that it didn't entirely work. Weird enough that it is to have a high concept kids movie, which Boss Baby very much was. The director of this, Tom McGrath, is one of the few kind of auteurs at DreamWorks, having done all three of the Madagascar movies and even Megamind. And he does kind of have a stranger visual style to it, and lots of kind of odd kind of kid humor type of logic that kind of made it a lot more enjoyable than... No? That made it a lot more enjoyable than the plot would actually be. When this film starts thinking about its plot, other than doing kind of its weird logic and its kind of supreme strangeness, it doesn't really work as well because the plot is kind of silly, stupid, and just very strange. You often... I know. No, I'm getting to that part. You often wonder when you're watching the movie what kind of movie it's trying to be, because when you have a kid Timmy's kind of weird, crazy imagination, a Rugrats style sort of imagination where he can imagine the world being a pirate ship, or when he's riding a bike like he's on a space station, all these things. And that can be really interesting and amazing, but then other times you have this whole thing with corporate espionage and like market shares and stuff. That part never really works, and I guess that's sort of really what the movie's about. Those parts never really gelled, because often if someone was like, what's this movie really about? I'd have to answer 6 different things, and it's probably best I just say, oh, it was, you know, the Boss Baby movie. People be like, oh, okay, I sort of get it. It's very kind of confused narratively, although I think visually in the animation is actually the height of what DreamWorks really can do in terms of the design and the feel of it. It actually has kind of like more of a whimsical, cartoony style than even Trolls or Home has had. Boss Baby is often kind of just a weird tangent in what they're doing that doesn't entirely make a lot of sense, and kind of hopes these more touching moments and its weird plot will actually connect some of this nonsensical stuff together, which it never really does, making you kind of confused at what you really just watched, and you often wonder what the hell they were even thinking while making this movie, but also kind of making it a little more enjoyable than I ever thought Boss Baby probably would be, in this magical kind of weird land where babies are made in kind of a fantasy thing where people don't have to explain sex to their kids and things. Babies are either sent to a family or they're sent to corporate and in management, and basically they do this by tickling babies, and if the baby laughs when it's tickled, it is sent to a family. If it is not, it is sent to management, although that is not actually accurate because babies can't be tickled, or at least newborn babies. They don't laugh when they're tickled. So in that case, I guess all babies would go to management, or unless that's trying to say something about babies. I don't think they are, but that's wildly inaccurate about babies. But obviously the whole setup is a complete fantasy, so I guess I should just kind of relax about that one. After it turns out that puppies are taking over more of the cuteness, the market share of cuteness, they send Boss Baby to a family who works at Puppy Co., which I presume is a puppy mill thing, which they never get into, but it's kind of alluded. I mean, if they're a corporation that does puppies, it's probably a puppy mill. So really, Boss Baby's doing a really probably a good thing. But anyway, whose name is Boss Baby, by the way. I'm not messing up that part. I just want to be clear. His name is actually Boss Baby. They never give him, I think they give him a baby name, but his actual character name is Boss Baby. He goes to live with Timmy Templeton, who's having a nice life with his parents, Ted and Janice, until they decide to have a baby, and he just kind of shows up in a cab, which is very strange and weird. Suddenly becomes their baby and bosses them all around and is always wearing a suit and has a briefcase, and only Timmy seems to notice there's a problem with that until he finds out what he's really up to is to stop puppies from making this forever puppy who will take away all the cuteness and no one will like babies anymore. He has to try to stop that, and then when he does stop that, he will go back to corporate and stop being a baby and taking away all the attention from Timmy. So of course they work together to take down puppies, basically. This film is sort of similar to Storks in that it has a lot to do with like corporate branding, which I'm not exactly sure why like kids movies are so focused on that currently. I don't know if that's something kids can relate to or it's something people who make animated films are really into. I think with both this and Storks, it's kind of curious, like the whole idea of the plot. You're like, did anyone really want this kind of a movie? Boss Babies I sort of enjoyed more than Storks. I think they both kind of go for the very like crazy kind of Warner Brothers type of style, and Boss Baby goes in a lot more stranger directions, which I think this director showed in Madagascar 3 as well, which is something that I think DreamWorks can do impeccably well, is kind of show kind of like weirder animation, weirder plots when they want to, which they don't really highlight as much as Boss Baby does, which I think the kind of surrealness of the whole thing, and it does feel like a weird Warner Brothers cartoon. The fact that the baby shows up in a cab, the whole idea of that this baby has a secret Boss Baby formula that keeps him to be the Boss Baby. But then it's one thing to have animation strangeness and have like weird kid jokes and things like that, but to have like jokes from a David Mamet play in your ad campaign, I don't like. The cookies are for closers thing, I'm like, does anyone really? Glengarry Glen Ross is cool, but like how many people are even really getting it, or is it just like funny that he's saying that? I guess that's kind of the thing. I guess that like that's the riff of Alec Baldwin playing this character, which is kind of sort of bizarre. There's a lot of really fun whimsical stuff that clearly a really smart animation director comes up with. It kind of even reminds me of kind of the free willingness. You can do anything you want in animation, even having a part where Elvis impersonators talk to each other in Elvis impersonator and they have like subtitles for that, which is really funny. They have a lot of like actually very clever jokes and really just strange, odd like visual things that you're just like, wait, what? This is Boss Baby? That I think like something like Storks design wise might have been a little more interesting in terms of character design and things, but never got into kind of the weirdness where Boss Baby actually makes me think like, what exactly were they thinking? And Storks I sort of don't care because I had a really terrible time. Boss Baby's still amazingly stupid and kind of your typical kind of big blockbuster animated film, which is pretty much the thing that holds it back more than anything, is that while you're watching it, you know these kind of familiar beats, and it kind of like restricts it within that. That's the thing that held it back the most. There's so many interesting ideas that they could have just made a whole movie about, particularly with Timmy's imagination and the idea that maybe the Boss Baby is part of his very overactive imagination and that he was just a baby and he's just imagining all these things could have been really cool. But of course they don't go into that. They have to go into this whole thing with puppies and a forever puppy, and this whole idea of like how babies need to be more popular than puppies. Although it's like, I saw a review from Rachel Wagner and she pointed out that like love doesn't really work like that. There's not like a certain allocated amount of love you have. I mean, it's kind of like a lot of kid logic, which I thought sort of works in it. There's a particular kid joke I really liked where the kid thinks that the song Blackbird was written for him by his parents. He says something about that and Boss Baby says, well, what are your parents, Lennon and McCartney? The kid doesn't realize that, so he goes like, you don't even know our parents' names, it's Ted and Janice, what's wrong with you? And it's like, that's a total kid kind of thing. I thought that was kind of fun, and the kind of strange kind of ideas that kids have. I think this film kind of inhabits really well because it's more from the perspective of the 7-year-old than it is from a baby who's a boss. But when it does the traditional kind of animated things of like duty humor and farts and things like that, I kind of almost forget those parts. I think of the kind of weirder, stranger parts that kind of work a lot better for Boss Baby, frankly. There was some surprising people in the voice cast, particularly Miles Bakshi, who's the grandson of Ralph Bakshi, particularly the Lord of the Rings kind of alarm clock in this because his grandfather directed Lord of the Rings, the animated one, of course. The voice of the kid who's kind of doing a Stand By Me type narration is by Tobey Maguire, which I like a surprise Tobey Maguire in anything. I wouldn't say Boss Baby's necessarily like a great DreamWorks movie that makes me believe in the studio again. It's not the How to Train Your Dragon movies, but it highlights probably what they can do better than certainly their last two movies. But it's kind of like a strange blockbuster movie that makes you go, oh, that's interesting. It's kind of odder than I thought it would be. That's maybe better than I thought it would be, but I don't necessarily want to see it again, and it's certainly not less stupid than I thought it would be. And frankly, it's stupidity, and the idea that it has to pull your heartstrings and be like a Pixar movie is probably one of its biggest mistakes. Doing kind of just a cartoony animated film and having them just be funny is something that modern CG animated films and bigger studio animated films really have a problem with doing. They like almost have to do the Pixar thing, almost like before Pixar came along, if you were trying to do a mainstream mainstream studio animated film, you try to have songs in it like Disney movies. Adhering to these things kind of hurts them more than it helps them, and it feels almost like they're hitting genre conventions just because they have to, not necessarily because the narrative has to. And Boss Baby has narratively so many weird things going on, it's kind of hard to keep track of what weird narrative thing it's trying to do exactly. The director of this, I think he has a really cool movie in him. Maybe that was just the first Madagascar, or Madagascar 3. I wasn't a huge fan of Megamind, and I don't remember Madagascar 2 that well, but I think he has a weird, strange kind of animated comedy within him, and if he just stuck to that rather than kind of just hitting all these beats of sentimentality. And I think Boss Baby could have actually been a really fun movie. Things that work about this are the kid humor and going so towards it, he almost doesn't care what that necessarily is. You know, I think Storks was more highlighted trying to be a sillier Warner Brothers type comedy, and that didn't entirely work, but like Boss Baby, when it does these weirder, stranger things, is kind of on its own wavelength. It just doesn't stay on that enough to have been an interesting or even really good movie. DreamWorks has kind of been lost in the woods for a long time now, and they're more of a corporate studio than an auteur one, and the fact that they can't let somebody who's been with the studio since Madagascar to now really make a more interesting movie, maybe that's the director's fault, or maybe it's DreamWorks' fault. But oftentimes I feel like with DreamWorks, it's not really the auteur's fault, it's probably the studio's fault, or at least that's the evidence we've gotten so forth while watching DreamWorks movies. Although this is the only one you've seen, right? Are you a fan of DreamWorks? No, not at all. You weren't so into it? Well, that's, from a baby's perspective, Boss Baby was not very good. She preferred Baby Groot. She didn't?
No.
She liked Groot.
No, she didn't.
She doesn't like Hollywood's baby representation at all, so far, as she's seen it in 2017. The Boss Baby kind of had some more interesting elements, but overall was kind of a really messy animated film that makes you wonder what exactly they were thinking while making it, and kind of doesn't even give you kind of the surface level reason you're probably going to see Boss Baby, which is to see a silly baby talk like a businessman like in the 80s or something, and doesn't even really do that well. But for its few kind of glimmering moments, it's a strange, weird, animated kind of weird kid fantasy, and that's when it really shines. But it just doesn't have enough of that to make this more of a breakout of DreamWorks animation. Just kind of makes it par for the course in their ensuing filmography that usually ends up kind of subpar at best. So if you have seen... You have seen Boss Baby. Okay, you've seen Boss Baby. Would you like to comment? Now you're speechless. Okay, so if you've seen Boss Baby and you would like to comment, then comment below, down there, and subscribe. You don't, well, you should, that's mean. You're not going to subscribe? Who do you subscribe to? Oh, okay, wow. Alright, and subscribe if you would like to. You did it, Sophie. You made a video. You were in a review. Isn't that cool?